Greetings, this is Michael King. I just walked a good bit of the Appalachian Trail, maybe about 10 miles total. I went down to Little Bald and a little bit fast. I'll be posting some pictures and videos from that on my Twitter feed, which is my main app. But today I want to focus on more basic framing devices around how the power structure works. So one thing I want to address really quick is I end up blocking this guy on Twitter. He's like, oh, hey, you're giving facts about the power structure that's been hidden while you talk about how these Luciferians or whatever are working on externalizing the power hierarchy. So all you're doing is just helping them do that. Because like, this guy he's gone down a fundamentalist path where he's been posting videos of a known cult leader and is calling anyone who doesn't use this really weird interpretation of the gospel and doesn't talk about 24/7 any of them is like a heretic. But one thing I want to address with that though is what I'm doing when it comes to explaining the hierarchy like this, and also with the people who is retweeting, because by the way, it's like half the people he retweeted were people talking about the same things I do, and also in my DMs, like, and we're giving each other feedback and stuff, so that's what makes it funny. But yeah, like, how the externalization of the hierarchy works is you're seeing all these psyops, all these misinformation accounts give away information, but it's done in a way that it paints their version of history. It's like, oh yeah, you have this one core dynasty behind all these institutions that control everything, but oh, wait a second, we're actually the bloodline of Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene, which you start seeing with things like Dan Brown. So that's the main thing, like getting information that cuts through a lot of the fog from just really reading a lot of these books that address the conspirators' hierarchy while also looking at and testing different framing devices. If you can get that accurate, it actually ends up bypassing, oh yeah, so there's that smaller bald mountain behind me, but it ends up completely bypassing the whole psychological operation behind the externalization of the hierarchy. So wanted to point that out. But what we're seeing with the externalization of the hierarchy is it's going to take on a making official what's been de facto and behind the scenes. So this goes into what I was talking about in my last video, because essentially power operates both de facto and informally at the top. All right, so remember, my last video I talked about how de facto is like official, legally recognized, structured and open, what you see is what you get hierarchy. Well, that's de jure. So de facto is more of how things actually are. I almost got a little confused, but yeah. De jure is what you see is what you get, what's on paper, and de facto is how things really go on. A similar thing is the relationship between formal and informal. So formal is like official, tied to hierarchies, authoritative, and if it's an event, it's going to be how it's going to be told. It's going to be overall the consensus, but it doesn't automatically correspond with, oh, well, formal corresponds with de jure and informal corresponds with de facto. So you can have formal organizations like something official, like maybe the State Department, right? It's formal organization, but that's actually flexing power from informal groups and power moves that were made behind closed doors, or lobbying groups, or the people behind the lobbying groups. It's like there can be other things going on. It's like you can have a lobbying group influence politicians that take things in a certain direction, and some people analyzing things are going to be like, oh, look, well, whoever those lobbying groups and the formal groups that those formal lobbying groups represent, those are the shot callers. But then once you peel back the curtain more, you realize there's a even more hidden network that has their finger in pretty much every pie, that can switch and rotate between lobbying groups, also while tricking people in that middle management who actually believe in those causes. They can juggle between them to have their objectives accomplished over a much larger period of time. So, because this is going over the basics of the power structure, I also want to discuss how formal and informal, and also de facto and de jure, correspond with the top shot calling apparatuses. So I'm going to make a distinction right here. Whenever I talk about the more informal upper level apparatuses, that all, in my mind, falls under the Illuminati umbrella, because formally an organization called the Illuminati didn't exist until 1776 in Bavaria. Arguably had it before that with the Alumbrados or Illuminated ones in Spain. But how those kind of hierarchies work is they're deliberately non-formal. It's like they'll take oaths and initiate each other, and they'll be able to recognize their own, but they'll even penetrate different secret societies, different levels than there. It's like you'll have people in ethnic mafias fighting each other, like maybe certain clans of the Sicilian mafia killing each other, but then you'll have people that have sworn oaths at inner levels collaborating between those two sides. There's quite a lot of examples of this, but right, so just make it simple. The Illuminati is a part of the hierarchy that specifically branches off in informal groups, and they constantly will change their name and splinter off into other groups. It's like how you originally will have these revolutionary parties in countries. Sometimes they'll get crushed, but then, oh, well, you'll have the Bolsheviks versus the Mensheviks this time. And constant name changes and new brands. Same thing with mafia groups, criminal groups. All of that, in a way, goes back to it goes before the Bavarian Illuminati, but a lot of those hierarchies through both the Jesuit order and the Teutonic Knights got absorbed into them, and then refunneled back into Bavaria and pretty much mass-produced that whole infiltrating groups and influencing things informally. So that's one obvious source of informal power, but because they're penetrating other organizations, and they work for an often hidden and unknown power. And by the way, there's different centers of power for it. And I'd argue that the Illuminati shot callers are more tied to one single dynastic group that's in lockstep. So it's not like, oh, these things are in competition, but yeah, it's like they'll use formal groups because you'll have people that are in these formal groups all in the know who know they're in on something, but not all of them will be initiated in that particular Illuminati sect that's penetrating everything. That's more of related to Communist International and these mafia groups now. But there can always be overlap. It's like I said, you can have people with those informal power broking roles end up taking on official positions. So I post in the Jesuit World Order subreddit a lot because I generally agree with the thesis that the Jesuit order is overall the brains behind this whole world government. And I'd say the Jesuit order, and also to a lesser extent the Knights of Malta, especially when it comes to intelligence and espionage. And also you can say same thing in Knights of the Garter. It's a more selective and small group, but also tends to be on average a whole lot more high. Those branches of the hierarchy would be where you see lines blur between formal and informal, but also de facto and de jure. So on my last video, I discussed how pretty much every single CIA director is a Knight of Malta or Knight of Columbus, and They started meeting under Spellman, according to that Mother Goose article, and Paul Williams' Operation Gladio documents this. And there's a couple other sources that do, but yeah. Because the Cardinal in New York is usually one of the shot callers for the CIA and State Department and all that. He's also the regional manager for the Knights of Malta. And this also applies to Timothy Dolan, the guy now. So I didn't cover that in my last video, but yeah, Timothy Dolan was the chaplain for the Knights of Malta going all the way back to 2003. So yeah, like it's these old military orders going back to the Crusades that have also absorbed older Babylonian and Roman hierarchies that have rebranded and gotten different stamps of approval as well, that coordinate between official and non-official channels. So when it comes to, I'll start with the Jesuit order since I brought that up, and I'll go on with more to the Knights of Malta and Knights of the Garter. So the Jesuit order is really special because they have a large hand in education. So with education, you have formal organizations to be fronts for informal initiation rites, because I think I covered in my last video Joseph Redinger, how he was a Jesuit, how he went to Rome, was trained by Jesuits, and he was one of the people who created the Bilderberg group with Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands, who was also a Knight of Malta. But yeah, so this guy, he never entered the priesthood, and he was never officially a Jesuit, but he was trained by them. And also you can look at something called the Massimo Institute. Look at all the top Italian bankers who go on to head global institutions. And also you have people coming from places like Argentina, the United States, other countries. They'll go to a Jesuit school called Massimo Institute. It was created by the Massimo family. It's at the very top. And you have a bunch of people that come out of it. They're, even though it's a Jesuit school, it's like they're not Jesuits, but they go into top banking positions, top legal positions, become United Nations lawyers, and all their activities are in lockstep. So it's like, that's one of the reasons why the Jesuit order has a lot of overlap with the informal. And also under their, because they have a lot of plans in corporate entities, but also because they're able to conceal assets as an extension of the Holy See, essentially. They have a bunch of the same legal protections that the Vatican does. They're able to conceal assets, gather intelligence, because look, like having all those positions and having schools, which are top intelligence gathering organizations formally, like they're literally the top intelligence agency there is. Like they're not only do they have because these CIA Knights of Malta, it's like, yeah, like they are formally on paper Knights of Malta, but that's not like them. The CIA right there is the de jure hierarchy, the official one. De facto, it's Knights of Malta, and yeah, that is a formal entity, but that's where those categories stop overlapping. What makes the Jesuit order special is it's both doing these formal power moves and informal ones. So it's got so many on paper legal justifications going for it. And Knights of Malta also have interesting passports that pretty much give them immunity for mafia operations, because they actually have the most limited passport, where if you have I think it was 450 Knights of Malta passports, you can cross any border at any time, no questions asked, very similar to a Vatican diplomatic passport. And that becomes very convenient for mafia logistics, especially all over Europe and places that are more beholden to, oh my gosh, hey, that guy's got a Knights of Malta Vatican passport, I better not mess around with any of them. So yeah, the Jesuits have education, and obviously that's going to give them access to health, that's going to give them access to Pentagon through Georgetown and the State Department, because it's like the Pentagon and State Department, they're pretty much overseen by Georgetown. I forgot to cover that. So it's like Council on Foreign Relations, which oversees the CIA. That's in large part, and they do have some input in the State Department too. It's like these things all work together, but generally, the Council on Foreign Relations is what's running the CIA, and that more answers to Londonian channels. But Georgetown, on the other hand, that runs like DC and the Pentagon, and these more federal, these federal government HQs. Also, you can argue FBI with its proximity to Maryland. That more goes to the Vatican. That more goes to Rome. All right. So my phone's almost dying, but I'll wrap it up with two more things. So when it comes to Knights of Malta, Knights of the Garter, those things also. So Garter I covered a little bit with how Felipe, the King of Spain and King of Jerusalem, being a Knight of the Garter, gives them access to these more London-based channels. It's recognized formally under these internationalist channels. It's like all the globalists, they are very impressed if someone's Knight of the Garter. It's why when Tony Blair became a Knight of the Garter, he looked so proud, and why you had all these United Nations neoliberal think tank guys drooling over it. But when it comes to the Knights of Malta, they are quite involved with embassy and negotiating foreign policy between nations. But it's like, because of the way there's interface between formal and informal, a lot of times the top spies and the people who know the most about logistics, which the people who either heads of state themselves or the people heads of state listen to in those countries, that the top financiers, they often hammer out negotiations through embassies and through ambassadors. An example of this is Sforza. So Sforza, from the Milanese Sforza dynasty, they're still very powerful, and they negotiated how Europe and America would carve up colonies in Italy following World War II. And he also did this through these influential anti-fascist channels, because he left with Mussolini. But anti-fascism is a branch of, I'd argue, the Illuminati that it's going to be able to play between both sides of the Civil War, because it's like, oh hey, communists and capitalists are anti-fascist, so that gives them formal smokescreens that a lot of people on outer levels of these groups don't recognize, so they don't see they're being subverted. But yeah, so the Knights of Malta have that influence through diplomatic channels, and there's obviously going to be legal immunities there. I wanted to go more on the Knights of the Garter, but my phone's almost out of battery, so I'll just end with, back to Sforza. Sforza's a good example of this. So I'd say where you'll find the overall shot callers exercising the top levels of informal power are also going to be the people hands-on with arts, entertainment, and especially philosophy. It's like people will say, oh, you're so why aren't you more concerned with politics? Politics are where all your choices are decided. I'd say no. Politics is downstream from philosophy, and you'll find very high-end influential people either directly hands-on with philosophy, or not only are they like talking to philosophers, they are the top philosopher themselves. And Immanuel Kant was pretty high level. Jeremy Bentham, it's easier to prove this. So Jeremy Bentham was one of the shot callers and organizers behind the French Revolution. He was one of the very top guys of British intelligence, and he's the guy who was utilitarian. He ended up coining something very, very convenient for the ruling class, and that's the whatever means necessary type morality. And also what determines the ultimate good? Well, what's best for the greatest number of people, the common good. So hey, if your interests are opposed to the common good, your self-interest needs to go out the window. So yeah, you can see why the ruling class would be interested in promoting ideas like that. But also, when it comes to luxury goods like wine, like art, all this stuff, that gives leverage in the behind-the-scenes logistics that actually transcends banking and all these cartel industries. It's like they're literally priceless. The kind of items that you see people dealing with these informal channels, like people overseeing logistics for antiques, art, delicacies, and also I'd put slavery, human subjects in that, but the people at the top of those ownership chains are pretty well hidden, but they all go back to the same usual subjects. And I'd say the people at the top of that would be people with Italian last names and British last names, associate the British House of Lords and these British orders of chivalry. But yeah, my battery's almost dead right now, so I'm going to wrap it up. If you made it this far listening, thank you for listening. I wanted to be able to film a video from the top of Big Bald, but yep, my phone's about to shut off, so enjoy it. And